Welcome to the plantation. I'm your host, Slave Master Lucian. So everyone has now wondered why is the DA up in arms about the BRICS Summit that took place from the 22nd until the 24th of October back in Russia. Now I cannot understand what's the DA's stance on regards to the ANC, or should I say the ruling party, deciding to sign deals with Russia. Now I believe there is some kind of a agreement that was signed by the Development Bank of Southern Africa at the BRICS Summit, and I believe that the Development Bank Southern Africa has responded to the DA with regards to their particular statement, claiming that there is allegedly deals that were signed from the DBSA with Russia, etc., etc. And this obviously led to the public outcry by John Steenhuisen talking about the ANC's alliance with Russia. And then Gaten McKenzie, the sports, arts and culture minister, calling out John Steenhuisen that he needs to stop worrying about other people and get on with the job. Kudos to Gaten McKenzie for doing that. Yes, because sometimes I feel that these politicians are just a waste of time. Just like the controversial agricultural portfolio, Mr. John Steenhuisen appointing a podcast as a chief of staff. Congratulations to him. So therefore, I would recommend that Minister John Steenhuisen actually is mindful of his actions and stop worrying about what other people are doing. Focus on your portfolio. Focus on the land. Just like the Freedom Charter said, the land shall be shared amongst those who work it. So yes, focus on that, Mr. John Steenhuisen. Then worrying about the BRICS Summit, worrying about Russia's alliance with the ANC or the ruling party, and also Development Bank Southern Africa. Any deals that were signed at the BRICS Summit that they want to scrutinize and actually find out if any wrongdoings were done during those sessions of deal making. Now, according to the DA's website, let's have a look and see what this entire uproar was caused for and what is their approach and how do they feel about the alliance of South Africa and Russia in the BRICS bloc. Let's have a look quickly. So according to the DA, this is what was published on their website on the 24th of October 2024. DA condemns Russian deals with Development Bank Southern Africa. So the DA strongly condemns any potential financial collaboration between the Development Bank of Southern Africa and the Russian state-owned bank VEB RF, an entity whose dubious conduct has resulted in sanctions which preceded Russia's latest illegal war in Ukraine. So reports of an agreement between South Africa and this so-called bank from Russia, or should I say Russia's state-owned bank VEBRF, as announced by the state-owned Russian news agency. They are deeply concerned, even though that Development Bank Southern Africa has seemingly denied signing any credit line deal in a lengthy lawyer speak statement. This situation raises several questions. This is now according to the DA. What was the rationale for the engagement with VEB.RF in the first place? The engagement takes place at a time when the world, including key international partners, stand united in sanctioning Russia's war machine. Yes, we all are aware that there are certain countries, due to the invasion and untimed occupation of strategic territories within Ukraine by Russia. Yes, a lot of countries will oppose that. A lot of countries will. By all means, there are a lot of countries open and vocal about the position of Russia and its invasion of Ukraine's territories. I fully acknowledge that. But how come does no one speak about the United States invasion of the selected countries? What about their approach on Afghanistan? What about their approach on Iraq? So it's easy to point a finger and say, yes, Russia, it was wrong of you to invade the Ukrainian territory. But how come no one talks about the United States' involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq? Just to name a few of the countries that they have invaded for their particular strategic national interest. Yes, we also have national interest in South Africa. You should go look up on the DIRCO website. There is a framework document published about South Africa's national interests. Just for information and educative purposes, I would recommend that you do go read it. Yes, it might be a little long to read. However, it is of grave importance that we understand what is South Africa's national interest. So the same can be said for United States. Their national interest. Yes, their national interest is oil, and we all know the reasons being for them invading those countries was due to opium, which is Afghanistan. I believe it's the world's largest opium producer. Opium is used in manufacturing of heroin, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's also used in perfume or cologne, if I'm not mistaken. I do speak under correction. And then obviously oil, black gold. We all know. And yes, the countries that also declared where no weapons of mass destruction was found prior to the early 2000s under the Bush administration, yes, that is also a cause of concern. So in all fairness, before we point fingers and say, yes, the ANC is wrong in aligning with Russia, and yes, condemning Development Bank of Southern Africa supposedly signing these particular credit line deals in private at the BRICS Summit, is completely dumbfounded. Yes, the DA doesn't like this, I get that, but who do you think we should side with? Do you expect us to side with these Zionist Jews, the ones that are condemning, or should I say not condemning, the ones that are perpetuating the anarchy and the continuous conflict in Gaza? Do you think we should side with those people? I'm sure that will be fantastic for South Africa. What was the point of taking the Israeli as a whole, or should I say Israel as a whole, for their actions in genocide in Gaza to the International Court of Justice versus us siding now with Zionist representatives that are perpetuating violence and anarchy in Gaza? What would the purpose of all of that be? Should we now decide to side with the former colonial countries such as the UK, Italy, Belgium, Germany, Portugal? Should we side with our former colonial masters? And then who are we going to please? Because somehow, if I look, South Africa is always caught up in some form of geopolitical pleasing relationship mechanism. I call it that because the West wants South Africa to side with them so that they can fuel their specific national interests and their strategic interests in South Africa. Because we all know that, yes, the United States love threatening us with AGOA. Should they find that there's something that South Africa does that does not abide with their international order, then automatically we get threatened with access to certain exclusive trade markets within the US. However, we can't do the same when we have the likes of Elon Musk bringing Starlink into South Africa. But yet, the very same United States government wants to threaten South Africa through the means of AGOA. And yet, we must just be happy and we should welcome Starlink into South Africa with open arms and not actually give a fuck and be like, okay, no, let the Americans bring their satellite technology to our shores, to Africa, let them. So we must just be okay. So how come can we not do the same that the Americans do? Because in all fairness, America tried this with China. They lost in the trade wars because China is the biggest exporter in the world currently. And because America builds their pride on manufacturing, therefore America wants to still push out all their manufacturing globally, but they are unable to do so at the rate that the Chinese are exporting their products worldwide. So that takes us back to the DBSA. Which side should we choose, DA? Which side? Should we choose the Israelis that are perpetuating genocide? Should we choose the Americans that were also part and parcel from the colonial empires, that also took land, that also invaded countries? So we should side with these type of people that were basically killing people left, right, and center. And yet now the DA wants to condemn the ANC for siding with Russia, just as the same with the arms deal. The inquiry was lodged along with a bunch of independent judges to say that the Lady R ship that was found at the naval base in Simonstown was supplying Russia with weapons. And then, after the independent inquiry was done, along with the judges appointed to the inquiry to assist in completing the investigation, yes, Mr. Brigety, the United States ambassador, you were dumbfounded because your silly remark and allegation and statement crashed the rand. And then, when you found out that your intel was wrong, what did you do? What did the US government do? Did they apologize and say, oh, South Africa, we're truly sorry about our baseless statement and alleged accusation? The independent investigation confirmed that there were no arms supplied to Russia. Who's the fool now? So DA, ask yourself again this question: who should we side with? Because South Africa's always caught up in the storm. If we side with the Russians, they don't like the Russians. If we side with our former colonial masters, that's not good for business either, not good for trade. Maybe we should start siding with Africans. I think it's for the best, because our interests should be taken into account. Instead of trying to appease the West and also trying to appease BRICS, just maybe we start siding with Africans. Then maybe that will bring back our unity between African countries. Because if it's unsatisfactory for a large portion of people for us to side with the West and then for us to side with Russia, remember, we keep our economic relationships with the United States at a very clean slate, because they are one of our biggest trading partners. However, we also keep our relations with Russia also in good hands, because Russia is not only a big exporter of certain things to South Africa, such as vodka. Russia is also the world's second largest oil producer. So I suggest that keeping them within our trading bloc could benefit us long term, because potentially we can start sourcing our oil from Russia. That's another plus factor to it. However, I just do not want South Africa siding with people that have zero regard for human rights. I also do not want South Africa siding with countries that actually built their empires off the backs of colonial slave trade. I do not want South Africa siding with those types of countries. So in all fairness, it leaves us no option. Let's side with Africans and let's see how that goes on and how that takes place. Just maybe when South Africa openly and fearlessly announces, instead of siding with BRICS or instead of siding with our Western counterparts, how about we side with our African brothers, our African countries, our African neighbors. Yes, then we can pump Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. We can increase the low threshold of trade between African countries and actually bolster trade more often, because who does not want to buy a South African item? The Africans love South African things. Besides our women, they love our goods. Just as much as the DA opposes South Africa's siding with Russia, just as much as we should oppose their neoliberal thinking and their colonial masters, or should I say their masters that complete genocide in Gaza. Just maybe side with African countries, and who knows, this might unlock some seriously potential value. So going forward, guys, we always have to appease people. We always trying to please left and right. This time around, I think we should go down south and we need to please ourselves. We need to please our African brothers and sisters. We need to side with African countries, because if BRICS is not going to do it for us, if AGOA is not going to do it for us, if the Development Bank of Southern Africa did not sign any deals in secret at the BRICS Summit, then by all means, I think it's time we further our national interests and actually side with African countries. That is just my take on why the DA was up in arms about it, and also what I do think of it. That is just my opinion. Remember, the mentioning on this channel is that any opinions and matters being discussed is not merely the stance of the community. It's just merely expressively stating what we think of certain matters. So therefore, we do respect you for listening, and we also do respect you for understanding. I'm just going to delve quickly at the last part of the DA's disservice towards this particular situation at the BRICS Summit. So it says here, having its employees plead guilty to espionage in the US, the Russian state bank VEB is widely known to employ Russian spies abroad. Even if there is no deal or any discussions of a deal with VEB, the situation illustrates the reputational and counterparty reliability risk South Africa faces when engaging with dodgy actors, which are prone to issue untruthful statements. Either the Development Bank South Africa is lying or its Russian counterpart, VEB, is lying. So you want to tell me that a Russian state-owned bank is lying. So you want to also say that Development Bank of Southern Africa is also lying. Shame on you, fucking DA. Shame on you. How can you make a statement like that and say both entities are lying? Maybe the DA should sign a deal with the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Maybe they should do that. Just bring that transparency into the open. On top of that, they say, yes, this development also potentially has direct and indirect financial implications. This is exactly not the kind of focus we need from the Development Bank on the same day as the Rand lost some of its hard-fought gains. Yeah, and who are the guys who manipulated the Rand? The neoliberal multinational companies, the banks. Yeah? All those foreign and domestic banks that manipulated the Rand. Yeah, hard-fought gains. Makes me wonder. Lastly, it says here, with South Africa already on the FATF grey list. That is that grey list that was basically financial fairness. It's an international grey list that South Africa was placed on with regards to their conduct when it comes to anti-money laundering. So we were actually placed on the FATF grey list. According to this particular description here, we should be actively working against the perception of financial flows to and from naughty places. Any agreement exposes South Africa and its entire financial sector to undue risk of sanctions and isolation. This while Russia makes up 0.2% of our exports. Interesting. So they say here, the DA calls for Boitumelo Bosako, as CEO of Development Bank Southern Africa, to urgently publish the meeting minutes from the VEB.RF engagement and any agreements signed in full. Failing to do that will require her to appear before the Parliament to account for Development Bank Southern Africa's involvement at the BRICS Summit. Wow. So in the interim, the DA, Democratic Alliance, they submitted a PAIA request to Development Bank Southern Africa regarding the engagement and agreements signed at the BRICS Summit. For those who do not know what a PAIA is, PAIA is Promotion of Access to Information Act. Basically, they submitted a request for that. And this is very, very interesting. I mean, this PAIA request basically covers the constitutional right of access to any information held by the state or any other person where such information is required for the exercise or protection of any right. Thank you once again for listening to my vlog, and thank you for visiting the plantation.